Okay, so you've been begging for the secret teachings, so I'll give it to you as we're going into 2020. He's wanted perfect vision. I'm gonna help give it to you. So forget everything you've been told about the code in Da Vinci's work. I'll give it to you right here. Certain questions being raised, obviously. Most obvious one is like, why is there a female figure in the Last Supper? Now I just want to say that for a long time, hundreds of years or whatever, people in Europe knew about the stories of the Cathars and their doctrine that contained a male and female figure, Christ and Magdalene. Da Vinci shows here that when looking at the entire matrix of reality, these stories, it comes down to it, while they're psychologically more appropriate and balanced to the teachings, not appropriate to a male dominant order, but it's more balanced teaching, but it's not the true story. The division in the Last Supper that we're all aware of shows that there's a separation between Magdalene and Jesus. Magdalene is on the side of negative traits. We're going to look at these as genetic traits, as well as the traits on Jesus' side. To spot the difference, there's two paintings. What's it called? I forget now. I don't know. My mind's been wiped recently. Another attack. My fault. Got too close to a mobile phone tower. Yeah. Watch out for those things, I tell ya. 5G comes in, these towers are bad enough. I was 2 days or something in a row for at least 2 hours subjecting myself to experiments. Noticed a lot of things, crazy shit going on around these towers, and once again subjected myself. Still alive, but yeah, right now my eyes are screwed, walking around like freaking Riddick or Cyclops or something. Like, yeah, it's not too good in light, especially around artificial light, but they'll come good. Okay, back to the story. Got the negative traits, like they've identified, like they can name the apostles, but when it comes down to it, what factors do we really have? These are the only real identifiable ones. Even Thomas seems to have a trait that was specific to John the Baptist, and that's another thing I want to cover. Like, everyone's always asking, did Da Vinci was he really in love, or do you really worship John the Baptist instead of Jesus? And there are people, the Mandaeans, I think they're called, that hold John in high esteem, and very well, because Jesus said there was none among you better than John. And we're going to cover this execution and decapitation of John in this occult war with the death cult versus the followers of Christ, that seem to have a magical essence that follow them. So why is the question is raised? We know that's not John the Baptist. Why is it with this other disciple? It doesn't really matter who specifically it is. Thomas. Jesus uses all these characters in the code to mainly tell his story and give the parameters of the matrix, and, like it or not, the war of the machines versus us and the servants of the machines. Call them machines, call them AI, whatever, call them archons. Specifics are also irrelevant. Now, I just want to point out, like we see all these pictures with John the Baptist through the Catholic Church. They're probably more obsessed with John the Baptist than anyone, specifically because of Revelations. Nature of the Beast is Revelation 666. I've done other videos that show that these are genetic markers used in timed attacks in individuals, as well as timed political events, bringing in laws and creating chaos and bringing their own order out of it. Despite what you think, Magdalene doesn't represent a divine feminine aspect. Jesus does. Jesus is still in representation of the divine feminine, the right side of awareness, or left side, whichever you want to call it. The right side of awareness in human beings is connected to the left eye. This higher abstract way of thinking, we all know Jesus was very cryptic, spoke in parables, and it's like looking directly at things and pointing things out isn't always appropriate with reality. Reality is very fragile. A double slit experiment shows that. Looking at that most intimate level of reality causes it to shift and alter, so it's better to kind of work around it, let it be. But pointing up, the up point, it's not, there's probably all these paintings, like religious paintings with John the Baptist and the point. Everyone's like, oh, what does it mean? What does it mean? The only place you'd want to point is up to your own eye. If the eye be single, the whole body will be full of light, as Jesus said. The eye of eyes. But pointing up, straight up to heaven, all works come unto heaven. It's where you can pretty much direct that. I want to discuss the decapitation. John the Baptist, like we all know, was decapitated, and Jesus was extremely sad. Once again, he said there was none better among us in the form of human beings or whatever. and John. They both represent two types of awareness and teachings. John baptized, it's kind of ritualistic, but in a good way. It's a logical mind, it's part of the logical mind that supports the abstract, which can be represented by Jesus. This logical mind has a certain logic. It's not, we all know, Einstein said imagination is more important than intelligence. Imagination is this higher side of awareness, the divine feminine, which Jesus represents once again. So we have these two sides in male figures, but that's once again irrelevant when we're talking consciousness. It's sexless, it's not physical, but we have archetypes to recognize them. Da Vinci doesn't recognize Magdalene as, or is not using Magdalene as a divine archetype in this, as we can see. And we can relate this to the Mona Lisa. In my other videos, how I showed there's a certain part of the mind that recognizes genetic traits, and when he came across Lisa, the deja vu, that familiarity, that trigger, that began that painting that he worked on and kept with him for all his life, little painting, used it to incorporate into the coding of the matrix he was describing. There's other Mona Lisas, and other females that he recognized this in. That's why there's probably other Mona Lisas that have been recognized and documented as possibly Da Vinci's work or whatever, who's ever. But she was the first that he came across. That's the only significance of Lisa. She was the first that triggered. He was intrigued by this mental function. So all these paintings, he stood there looking at paintings for a long time, and sometimes left unfinished work that if he couldn't perfect it within the code of all his paintings. Those facial structures, subtle structures, as we can see in modern day research, they've done pinpointing of the facial structure, and we can see that even Da Vinci himself is used as a model, they say. Possibly his own mother and Lisa. So we have all these familiar traits encoded into the Mona Lisa. Now when it comes to deja vu, even modern science will tell you that it's a sense of familiarity when you say you enter a place that's the same basic structure as another area you've been in, and you get deja vu, you get a feeling that you've been there before, or you recognize it. That's the subconscious basically experiencing that familiarity with different structure in a different place. So, hopefully that covers that section. I want to kind of move on to the attack on John. I think it was Herod and some chick Now apparently, as it's written, it's all nonchalant. Some chick did a dance for this king, or at the time, or some leader. I don't know what Herod's in my mind, maybe it was him, but she does his little dance, she does a little dance for him, and he offers her anything, and she wants the head of John the Baptist on a plate. Now, I tend to think this was pre-organised between her and him to, I believe he wanted, because John was a very influential leader himself, didn't have a title per se amongst the Jewish people, but he was a total leader that people went to him for advice and to discuss all sorts of matters, spiritual and really material as well. Very knowledgeable individual that supported Jesus, and even as high esteem as John was held among the people, he said, basically he's not even worthy to kiss Jesus' boots, and he's coming. So, yeah, that sort of influence, even over a king, can make a king very jealous. So here we go, a plan is hatched. They gather all their people, and then so Herod can't lose face. Obviously, he makes a promise, anything you want, really anything. And he's like, yes, I'm so pleased, apparently. But we all know, well, to me anyway, it's obvious that we knew what was going to be asked. This was the plan to get rid of John. And the decapitation, if you watch my other videos, that's how one of the first antichrists was taken down by one of the true lines of King, true lines of David. Cut his head off, timed the attack, busted out, bam, gone, see you later, Antichrist. Now, these acts, these first original forms have a lot of power, and that's why they're always mimicked and mirrored, especially in occult activities. John was attacked in the same way, signature maneuver, even in assassinations, all these things, even to the modern day, we can see they leave their signature. And 322, that number, described how it relates to 666, the code, 666, how their markers in the genetic code have shown you how it relates to the animal virus that is in our system, how it acts as an autoimmune function that can manifest, and when you've got external forces, physical and non-physical, acting at these certain times, everything's on a clock. This is the parameters of the matrix. Once you know what these parameters are, you'll see it. Now they do well to compartmentalize. The virus is being compartmentalized. Recently in vaccines, I think they got part of the virus from mice, bornavirus, because the bornavirus in us also, it does work with our immune system, not just in autoimmune. It does protect us from certain elements, illnesses, bacteria, viruses, whatever, but with others it mutates, and lets in and does like its own gene editing within your system. The elite praise this virus. Yeah, that's their bloodline. That's what they've been carrying, harboring, nurturing, is this virus. And recently, in the main population, not the 1 or 2% or whatever, it's used to compartmentalize. Once it's in there, people think, oh, it has no use, but it's part of your genetics. Even things like compassion and empathy are a program in your genetic code, and the virus does erase that empathy. It separates you from your subconscious. You should have more control over your dreams, more connection to the subconscious. Every driving force of a human being originates in the subconscious. There should be a conscious understanding and a connective link. The virus is separating that link. It's in different levels in different human beings. Some 8% of the genetic code is spawn a virus, some 10%, some 15%, and they're finding it more and more in different areas of the genetic structure. It's always popping up. So it's built as a virus. Like someone told me when I was very young, I just didn't really take notice. Some sort of vampire itself, really, some sort of weird doppelganger creature that just popped out of the woodworks with the biggest fangs I'd ever seen. True story. But anyway, just look for the fangs as well. A lot of people on TV have fangs. Yeah. The zombie virus, the vampire virus, whatever, it's all very metaphorical. But I want to suggest, apart from 322, I want to suggest another number that relates in the human genetic code, that should be there, that it's that this the 666 genetic markers that occur that become influential at certain stages in an individual's evolution. I want to suggest that number as 3 semicolon 15. It's written as a time, just like 322. Just like 322 equates to 666. I want to equate this to 555, but also the number 9. Numerologically, 9 does pop up out of 315. Now we know the occult has one of my favourite people I'm sub to at the moment mentioned, they have no symbols of their own. It's like, so when you devout Christians see these symbols, Jewish star, oh, it's the Rothschilds, and it's like, no, they have no original symbols of their own. They take everything, even like 9, how like Satanism's supposed to, like, number 6 is like there, and it's like a reverse 9, and it's supposed to be self-worship, and once again it's taken from the magical number 9 numerology, that multiply it by anything, it always comes back down to 9. Numerologically it's the self. But the 555 and 315 Yeah, it's all in there. But there is something else that this is the code, this is the structure. With this point, it's describing a genetic trait, and it's something that the virus has edited out or ends up in a Twin Peaks situation, like when you reach levels of maturity, which should equate to spiritual maturity as well. This virus rises in attack with it in an autoimmune function that can manifest in various ways. Even in the womb, the virus is in there working, and in certain conditions too. Don't count it out. Don't think it's just in there willy-nilly floating around like junk DNA. They reckon, like, all these things have a function. Don't make that mistake. And like I said, they're putting this virus into vaccines. If you look at some of my other viral videos, there's a link there that shows the articles. And there was a lady who exposed that, and something happened to her. I forget what it was. I don't know. Fired at the very least, probably killed at the worst, for exposing that or going against it. 26 minutes, what we got going here. Yeah, so these are genetic traits. As we can see, there's only a few, like Peter with the knife, Jesus with the money bag, Magdalene, who's extremely identifiable as female, very specific. The rest have no identifiable traits. So he is describing a genetic code, and he is showing that just like Lisa was